Good evening, everyone. Gayle, I had the pleasure of seeing you not too long ago and a wonderful conversation at dinner. And welcome back to the Wisconsin School of Business and Granger.
Thank you.
During our conversation, I was struck by the fact that you are a succinct communicator and you know the importance of an elevator pitch. So what's your introduction?
Okay, so, yeah, that's a great lead-in. So I wouldn't say that I have been a very succinct communicator over the course of my career. But what happened was when I left General Mills, I retired for 9 months. I say I'm a serial retiree. I was told that I need to, and I'm not done yet, I guess. I was told that I needed to have an elevator pitch and I needed to tell my story. And so I practiced telling my story and I realized I needed about a 56-story building in order to get through the story. So I had to come up with some kind of elevator pitch, and some of you have seen this before, but this is my story. 32 years at General Mills. I had 19 bosses in 21 years. I did invest $70 million in venture capital, which is a big deal for a research gal, I'm just saying. And then I retired for 9 months. And I say I failed at that. I joined the ARF for 4 years. And the study that we did in advertising and how advertising works today was actually a study that definitively quantified that you could unlock $31 billion to reinvest in advertising, not just trade and discounting, promotion, which is a really critical finding. And the way that we did it was some original work. It was a meta-analysis. Industry associations can get people to contribute their data. So it was on $150 billion worth of advertising that had been done over 15 years. And our analysis demonstrated that if you just add one platform, so if you're on television and you add digital, your ROI goes up. If you add mobile, your ROI goes up again, up to 5 platforms. Every platform you add, your ROI goes up. And it quantified for the industry to $31 billion. And that's why it was heralded as being breakthrough research. And you know how important digital spending is. But marketers, we were observing, were trading off. So they were just taking TV dollars and trading them to digital instead of adding the dollars in. And then I was at Foursquare for 2 years, and I have a few cases from that. But my most important numbers are the last 3. It's 111. And this slide actually had one of the ones on the bottom, which would be pretty interesting for me to pitch, because it's 1 husband, 1 dog, and 1 son. And I didn't know which one was going to be the number below the other numbers, so we kind of had to quick fix the slide.
That's wonderful, Gayle. The engineer in me thought that this was a reverse Fibonacci sequence, so, but I love the way you packaged the whole time. What strikes to me is the fact that you have, after graduating from Wisconsin MBA, spent almost 32 years at General Mills, including the last 15 years as the Vice President, Global Consumer Insights. And even though you have been at Foursquare for a shorter time, you've had an amazing run at General Mills. So what kept you at one organization for a long time, and what did you learn from your journey there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Look, I was planning, actually it's pretty funny, I was actually planning to work at Minneapolis at General Mills for 3 years and then move to New York. That was my plan. So I worked there 32 years and then I moved to New York, as it turns out. But look, what kept me there was, there are several components. One is they kept me highly entertained because I did have 19 bosses in 21 years. And when I figured out, I was like, I think I just need to sit down and count. Like, this just keeps happening over and over again. The thing I want to share with all of you is one of the reasons why that happened for me is because I became, as the researcher, the continuity and the person that had the intellectual property in the division. So I was in the cereal division for 7 years. That was unprecedented. And I had 6 bosses. So those years didn't go so well in cereal. Then I was, in one case at Yoplait, I was in Yoplait for 7 years also. And there I said we turned the business around twice. So if you think about it, and you're an engineer, that means we turned it down, and then we turned it back up again. So it was that. I mean, I had different people to work for, and there were very different dynamics at each of the decision tables. But the thing that I want to point out, because you're all going to be selecting groups to work with and companies to align with and people that you want to learn from and have for your mentors or sponsors, is that the company was really focused on retention. They were very focused on what our interests were and how we wanted to grow and develop. I certainly built that into my department and said that, I want people to decide what skills they want to get and how we're going to help them get them and create we created like volunteer projects where people could go out into the community and volunteer to build their skills that they could then bring back into the company. My company did that for me as well. And further to that retention point, they had an inimitable ability to, every single time I had any wandering eye at all to look anywhere else, they put something really big right in front of me. And so it just, anytime I started thinking about being on the outside. And the last thing because I did think about this question a lot, the last thing I'd point out is, just to give you just some perspective. When I started at General Mills, we were not allowed to go to events like this. We were not allowed out for, I want to say at least 5 years, maybe 7 of my career, because it was believed, and this is the honest to God truth, that we knew everything and that we would be giving those secrets away. Yeah. But what I came to understand later is what they actually didn't want is they didn't want the talent to be stolen.
You know that I landed on the shores of Minnesota, so during the 4 years at the university, General Mills was a well-known name. So it's great to see so many Wisconsin alums running the company there, and that was indeed personal for me.
Yes, they refer to that as the Wisconsin Mafia.
There you go. I've heard that term in many cities on my tour. So that makes me Don Sambamurthy. One of the things I really enjoyed our dinner conversation in Minneapolis, as you know, we have a kinship because my MBA was in marketing and strategy, and over these 30 years, I have been fascinated by how technology, and now what we call digital, has begun to continually transform, shape, and disrupt organizations. And we traded a lot of stories. Your recent journey at Foursquare is another great testament to how the digital is changing everything about us. And it looks like you have led the journey and the transformation, going from a very established legacy firm to a firm that was born in the digital era. So I'd love to have you share some of your experiences about what do you see as the transformational or disruptive opportunities in the digital space. What do you see as some of the opportunities? And of course, not everything is great, so what do you see as some of the challenges?
Yeah.
Would love to watch your journey.
Terrific, thank you. Yes, I think what we agreed when we were chatting at dinner was that the business is we started with transformed, and then we agreed it was actually being revolutionized. And I see the biggest kind of push and navigator of that revolutionizing force is digitization. It's definitely the most impactful. I personally think the most important for life, forever, and for my whole career, which now spans, you all know, more than 40 years, is actually humanization and the importance of whether you're actually talking to a real person and you're speaking to them on their terms and you're making a personal connection and you understand what their needs are and what their values are, and you can kind of translate that into brand value. And to put this all in context, the way I think about it is head, heart, hand, and feet. At the end of the day, consumers vote with their feet. And the important thing is for us to understand, and that's why this humanizing is so important, is to understand what their behavior is. This area of behavioral science has become really important, but it's really critical to get the right kinds of measurement of actual consumer behavior. For my career, that's been sales and sales data. You mentioned Foursquare. I personally ultimately forged some relationships with ways to stitch sales data and connect it back to Foursquare because I felt so strongly about that. I think it's hard for technology companies to really appreciate that if you can't put a dollar number on it, especially if it's a public company, you just pack it up and go home. So that's kind of feat. But if you think about historically marketing, and certainly in my career, and you can see examples of this today, it was, chocolate chips in the granola bar, or it was minivans that open on both sides. Believe it or not, they used to open only on one side. Or they have more cup holders, or they have cup holders. Believe it or not, sometimes they didn't have cup holders in cars. They were all just fact-based. And they were cerebral, so that's the head, right? But the heart, and what I knew and what I came to understand at General Mills, and why I believe for my career and the bulk of my career that I worked for the most brilliant marketers in the world, is because they understood that if you get people's hearts to beat faster, when you deliver a message to them, then they will be more loyal to your brand. It will no longer be about the price, it will be about the role that your brand plays in their lives. One of the most powerful points of perspective today, and the biggest things going on in the industry today, is actually not programmatic, it's purpose-driven marketing. And so if you really think about emotional connections and connecting your brand to sustainability, if it's soap and not using too much water, the reason I'm giving you these examples is I want you all to think about, as you're looking at various companies and businesses to be working in, and products to consume for that matter, making your choices and for your family and for yourselves, is to really think about how you personally feel about how that company is pulling on your heartstrings, and if they really are making a difference in your life, and which ones you believe in and advocate for, because they need that feedback. We all do. And the hand, to me, is really the most powerful. It's the mobile phone, and that's the navigator. So with that, we're able to accelerate brand growth, create these messages, and then automation to action. Action really needs to be people making decisions. First of all, sit at the table. So don't sit away from the table. Speak up, be heard. Find your voice, practice before you go in. So I'll say, I started out at the table behind the table, the seats behind the table. And I started out in the early days in the executive wing in the cereal division. These were cereal tastings, so you go in and you taste like 8 to 10 bowls of cereal, and there's milk in all of them. And there's the whole cereal and milk eating thing, and then everybody's got to talk about it. Well, I mean, my mom's Southern, and I was raised, in a more traditional environment. So I would clear the table with the R&D gals. I mean, I would recommend that you not do that. I was not sitting at the table. I was clearing the table. Yeah. And I didn't even think of this until later on. I mean, much later on. But what I understand now is you walk in, you find a place at the table, and you own your space. You figure out, I'm a very shy person. I made myself make one comment in every meeting. I made myself. No one advocated for me to do it. Sometimes, one time my boss said to me in front of 30 people, "What in the world are you talking about?"
Wow.
So don't think I was getting this receptivity I'm getting from him right now. I wasn't. Half the time you get who asked you to say anything? You stake your space. It was much less likely for me that what you hear often where somebody says something and then they say, a gal says something, then the guy says the same thing, and then they're like, "That's what I just said." That was less likely to happen for me, but I would take a strong stand. But the way I did that is I prepared. I studied and I prepared. I learned everything I could about what was going to happen at the meeting. I read all the pre-material. Nobody reads the pre-material. I prepared for off-sites. And, I'd speak up. Well, nobody was speaking up. And then they'd be like, "Gayle, I think that's a good point." Now everybody's going like, "Well, who's Gayle?"
Sure.
So some of it is not that difficult to do. And then the last thing is, if you go to the table, you have to speak up, because I'd take my team, they would get mad, they'd beg and beg and beg and beg, they'd be like, "I have to get to the meeting," and they wouldn't say anything. Right. And then we'd be walking out, and I'm like, "Why didn't you say anything?"
Yeah.
And they're like, "Well, you can't expect me to just say something just like in the moment." So I'm like, "Okay, well then you can't come to the meeting." You come to the meeting, you're gonna speak up at the meeting. Right. When you first get your job, go around and introduce yourself. Make eye contact. Have an idea of what the answer is if somebody's going to ask you a basic question like, where are you from, where do you work, what do you do? I didn't do this. I was super bad at it, let me just say. So what I decided to do, I'm obviously a woman. I was the only woman in so many settings, and so when I first became an officer at General Mills, they actually had an officer's dining room. But really, people didn't eat there that much except for very, very senior executives because nobody wanted to be asked how their business was doing. The only time that anybody went was if their business was doing really well and they wanted to brag about it. So it was usually like kind of a quiet thing. But there was one big round table that the senior, more or less staff people went to, and what they called the group coop, like the senior executives right below the CEO. Right. And so I get asked by one of them. I go to the lunch because I'm like, I'm game, I'm new, I'm going to participate. Yeah. That is advice I would give you, participate, and then don't do what I did, because I didn't think about what I was going to say when I got there. And so sure enough, somebody asked, and it's a round table, and it's my first lunch, so they're all trying to be really nice to me, right? It's all men and me. And they're all listening, and there's a kind of a fake thing going on there. And so I get asked, like, what's new in consumer insights? I just named the department Consumer Insights. I'm the new officer of Consumer Insights. I have absolutely nothing to say, and I'm not kidding.
No insights.
No, nothing. I was just like, and then one of them had to save me. So I would say is if you are being advocated for, you see anyone that advocates for you and says like, I want to hear what you have to say, forge a relationship with them. And start to really assess, like really try to assess where the power bases are in the organization and not by title. Okay. Watch where the behaviors are and watch where the decisions get made and how they get made. And that's really my key to being able to keep my job as long as I did with 19 bosses. This navigation of the fine line between creepy and cool is what we're going to be. We're going to be on one side or the other of that. I don't think that this pendulum swing to artificial intelligence and augmented reality and having your refrigerator tell you if you need milk or literally there was an ad that I saw. I was on the elliptical this morning. It's full confessions, and there was an ad for an iWatch or it was whatever it was. It basically told you that you were working out. Like, I think I know I'm working out. I don't think I need to be told, like, are you working out? Do you want to turn on something? Right. So I think there's a really double-edged sword to all the technology, and I think it's really easy if you want to be a futurist right now to just say it's all going to be about technology, and the world is going to change so much. Right. My perspective on it, I thought a lot about this before coming here tonight on your behalf. I think these are all very important questions. But my perspective is that you all need to look forward to what do you think the biggest, most important game-changing technology is going to be, and what you think the impact of it is going to be. Look back in the past. For me, it was the internet, and my ability to see that internet research was going to revolutionize research, and I shifted 85% of our research at General Mills to the internet in 1 year in 1998. Because it was obvious to me, it was patently obvious that consumers were going to be on the internet, they were going to communicate on the internet, and that they hated being stopped in a mall with somebody in a clipboard or on the streets of New York, which is still happening today, or getting a phone call at 5 o'clock at night saying, I have just a few questions for you. We were going to do a little bit of advice, and I know we're getting a little short on time, but that was a lot of the advice that I wanted to give is to be bold, take a stand, and don't ever shy away from the GDPR. Don't ever shy away from the things that seem like, who would want to work on the internet strategy? That was like the Roach Motel. Those guys were running as far away from that as they could possibly get. And so, but I thought, okay, sure. let's try.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just some of my naivete and, just trying stuff. And you make mistakes, but I will say if you're not kind of feeling afraid of any strategy you put together, then you haven't gone far enough. And if you are comfortable, then you're leaving something on the table.
Right.
And then those are the times in your career, I've had them too, when you wake up and somebody else does the thing that you could have done and you didn't do it, whether they're inside or outside your company.